Now, of course, the way we just did compound interest on our last video was very cumbersome. So if you can imagine compounding something daily for 3 years, you would have that many lines of work. So 365 times 3 lines of work. And that just is ridiculous. So instead of having to do that, there is, of course, a formula to help us find the compound interest. So the compound interest formula looks like this. Now, A represents the accumulated amount, so that gives us the amount that's in the account at the end of that period of time. So it's not going to compute just the interest, it's going to compute the total amount. Now let's take a look at what each of those things mean. A, of course, means accumulated, P still means principal, R still means rate, T still means time, but we've got this little extra variable that happens a couple of times, and N represents the number of times interest is compounded each year. Every year it's compounded a certain number of times. So annually means that it's compounded once per year at the end of the year. Semi-annually, of course, twice a year. Quarterly means 4 times per year. Monthly, there are 12 months, so N would be 12. Daily, there's 365 days in a year, so 365. Now, you will need a calculator for this for sure, and you're going to look for buttons that look like these buttons. I don't know what it will look like on your calculator, but it's either X to the Y, Y to the X, or the little caret button, and that will help us to know the exponent. Now, we've already done this question, but we did this the long way, finding the interest at the end of each year and adding it in. So let's make sure that this formula actually does what it's supposed to. So if I have accumulated interest equals 500, which is my principal, times 1 plus my rate of 5%, divided by N. Compounded annually means N is 1. And then to the 1, which is N, times T, which is 3. And this works because N times T gives us the total amount of times that it's compounded. Total compounded. So if it's compounded once per year in 3 years, that's 3 times total. Let's clean it up before we get our calculators out. 0.05 divided by 1 is 0.05. I add it to 1, I get 1.05. 1 times 3 is 3. This is that same process we used before, adding 1 to it so that it would include the original investment. In my calculator, I'm now going to take 1.05, and in my calculator, which is an iPhone calculator, if you turn it sideways, it's X to the Y, and then 3, and then equals. When I do that, I get this very long decimal that looks like 1.157 and 625, etc. Now, what I would encourage you to do is to leave that entire number in your calculator. A lot of people want to round this to the nearest tenth, nearest hundredth, nearest thousandth, whatever. Don't round in the middle of a question unless you absolutely have to. Now, if I take 500 times that giant number that's still in my calculator, that gives me 578.8125. Now, this is the point where I will round. It makes sense that I would round to the nearest cent because that's how we measure money. And so my total amount would be 578.81 because that 2 says don't round up. Notice that matches with what I had before. Try this question on your own, then press play to see how you did. So I'm trying to find the accumulated amount, so the total amount in the account at the end of 2 years. Principal is 3,000. Rate is 4%, so 0.04. N, compounded quarterly, means N is 4. And then N is 4 times 2. Again, I'm going to clean it up before I break my calculator out. 0.04 divided by 4 is 0.01. I add that to the 1. 4 times 2 is 8. That means there's 8 times that interest is compounded, 4 times per year for 2 years. And now I'm going to use my calculator, take 1.01 to the 8th. And again, that gives me a large decimal and that decimal is 1.082, blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to write it all out. I'm leaving that number in my calculator and then taking it times 3,000. And that gives me 3248.57011, etc. Now, what do I need to round to? I'm rounding to the nearest whole cent. So $3,248.57 is the amount in the account at the end of 2 years.